Okay? Everyone open your boxes. What you see before you is a Nintendo 3DS gift card, and it's up to you to figure out how to spend it. I wish you all the best. I love you. While I don't think 2024 had any truly monumental game releases or hardware releases,
Tail alert!
I do think that there were some subtle shifts that occurred over the last 12 months, which brings us to today's list, my top 5 harsh realizations of 2024. But I do want to be positive, at least a little bit, so each harsh realization will be accompanied by my hope for 2025. Here we go. Harsh realization number 5. Everybody knows Xbox will never win. It wasn't too long ago that I used to be able to come up here and say Xbox will never win, and it would ruffle some feathers. It would get a reaction. Now you say that and people just say, we know. Get over it. I don't know how to ruffle your feathers anymore. I don't know how to rattle your cage. I don't know how to tickle your beak. Xbox has just had a weird 2024. 2024 was the year of this sad official podcast where Xbox announced they will be selling 4 unnamed games on PlayStation platforms. It was the sad year they shut down Tango Gameworks. It was the sad year they treated Indiana Jones's PS5 release date as a please clap moment. And ultimately, it was the sad year of the This Isn't Xbox campaign. Kind of feels like a pivotal year for Xbox. So remember, in 2023, Phil Spencer appeared on that kind of funny Xbox-focused podcast to admit that he lost the console wars. Feels like it was 2024 when that really set in. Seems like from 2025 forward, we're going to think of Xbox more as a brand, more as a large collection of studios that have nothing to do with each other and the service that they're all connected to, than, a thing that sits beneath your TV. It seems like in an attempt to make the brand all-encompassing, they've muddied the very definition of the word Xbox beyond comprehension. That classic Will and Grace joke that we all remember has never been more relevant.
Think I could come back sometime and play with your Xbox?
Anytime, kid.
Bye.
Oh, would you look at that? This game is called an Xbox.
So I guess my personal hope for 2025 is that Phil Spencer comes out and reveals that the abysmal hardware sales of 2024 was a necessary smokescreen to facilitate the immediate release of the Xbox 360 Ultra, which is a $350 powerhouse that puts the PlayStation engineers to shame. And it's got a cool controller with 2 extra buttons that don't make sense. And it's the only way to turn on blood in the next Call of Duty campaign. Megan Mullally herself appears in the commercial exclaiming, "You can play on my Xbox 360 Ultra anytime." War over. Harsh realization number 4, Concord failed and Sony got away with it. It feels like they're really slipping through with this one. I feel like Concord's failure is still the biggest thing that happened in the world of video games this year. And yet, here at the end of December, barely feels like it. I think it's because Concord itself is so inherently uninteresting that everybody's just kind of sick of talking about it. It doesn't light people up, but it needs to be reiterated. This game was on store shelves for less than 2 weeks. They pulled it. I mean, you can't talk about 2024 without talking about this. No game has ever been this big and failed this thoroughly. And yet your audience says, who cares? We're ready to move on. What I'm saying is 14 years from now, some 14-year-old on ZTube is going to say, look at this old game called Concord. Nobody talks about this. It's actually the biggest flop of all time. And all of the AI-generated comments are going to be expressing their disbelief that such a thing ever really existed. My hope for 2025? Fair Games comes out in 2026. Number 3, harsh realization. People like games as a service. I like to come here and talk about the hot new game announcements of the week, right? I feel like in 2024, more than ever, that meant I had to cover a lot of game as a service announcements. They are cynically designed wallet munchers, sure, but the millions of players seem to like them. How can we tell them they're wrong. Games as a service isn't even a bad word anymore. My hope for 2025 is that games as a service earns some sort of new, more descriptive moniker. Like anime money game or person collection game. You know, something that evokes the feeling of walking into a very nice free park, but then you look in the corner and like there's this dark, dirty gazebo with a bunch of stressed out adults rolling dice in a circle. You're kind of worried about them, but also, you know, you're just there to have a good time. Harsh realization number 2. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is unpopular. When Final Fantasy VII Remake came out in 2020 and was subsequently a massive hit, I was frankly surprised and relieved. It's like, thank goodness that the efforts they put into this are resonating with such an unexpectedly large audience. People get it. Wow. It seems likely today that maybe Final Fantasy VII Remake was the beneficiary of a little COVID bump. Seems like a lot of things that were popular back then maybe wouldn't be if people were able to leave their homes. It was like new episodes of Marvel's What If. I used to be desperate for those, and today I can't even watch 3 seconds. 7 Rebirth, for me, though, felt like the payoff. The fulfillment of the promise made all those years ago. Probably the most bleeding edge, weirdest, sincerest, coolest, dorky game I've ever played. An unfathomable achievement. I didn't think video games like this could be built. So imagine my sick surprise when I log online and see that it is not met with universal praise. Imagine my dark, pitiful tears when I saw that some people dared to prefer Metaphor ReFantazio. Why can't they see what I see? My hope for 2025 is that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's upcoming Steam release will generate a new era of appreciators. There's going to be Reddit posts where people say, look what I found. In the hotel room, there's a little Tonberry Roomba that even has its own charger. And the knowing existing Rebirth fans, instead of being uppity, say, wow, I've never seen that before. Let's be friends. What do you think of Kid G? And then the narrative begins to slowly shift. Bye-bye, Metaphor. And my number one harsh realization of 2024 is even Nintendo can be boring. Pretty much the last thing I expected from Nintendo this year was to become the least interesting game publisher on planet Earth. I want to show you something from their most recent investor briefing. New Nintendo products for the holiday season. If you remove the repackaged Switches and unnecessarily large Splatoon amiibo packs, we're looking at 3 games here that, they're not bad, but for a Nintendo holiday period, probably rank amongst the worst they've ever put up. And I guess it's worth pointing out that Nintendo did something weird in 2024. They had this post asking for volunteers to participate in a technical test. And that turned out to be a mysterious game-like thing, and it never got a lot of coverage. And I don't know if that's just because everybody who participated just kept their promise to Nintendo, or if it was simply just not that fun. But anyway, that's clearly something we'll see more of in the next year, or maybe never again, hard to tell. Whatever the case, I'm sure you're thinking this too. Obviously, Nintendo would have a slow year leading up to the release of the Switch 2, which they would want to explode. So maybe this was just an outlier. Of course this was just an outlier. My hope for 2025 is that I'm back here 12 months from now crying that Nintendo was too weird this year. Why'd they have so many hot slime pits? Why was there so much beak tickling? Donkey Kong shouldn't have done that to that shark. Things like that. I want to be appalled and dismayed. I want to be anything but bored from Nintendo. And that's it for Delayed Input this week and this year. So long, 2024. Now, Delayed Input's about to go on one of our traditional 3-week breaks, meaning we will be back January 24th, 2025. But as always, there will be an in-betweener video in the space between. And I think there's a decent chance we'll see the Switch 2 in that time, but I have been known to dream that dream basically all of this year, so I could just be falling for it again. We'll find out together. Until next time, thanks for watching. I'd like to take a moment here at the end of the year to thank everybody who writes comments on these videos. Like, sure, a lot of them are repeated jokes or somebody asking what the honk means, but it's also a useful forum for keeping me in check. Sometimes I'm genuinely interested how people feel about a topic or the video they just saw, but also sometimes I just desperately need to be corrected. Remember that time I spelled Quanto wrong? I still think about that. And this last season, the Grateful Dead Bear shirt season, I can't wrap this up without setting a few things straight. So a few weeks ago when I was talking about how the Rogue Prince of Persia was proudly advertising its new artistic direction, I asked the audience if you had ever heard of anything like that happening before, and a few comments brought up a particular Bloodstained trailer. And I watched this, and it's crazy how much it does indeed dump on the previously advertised look. They start with a montage of plainly rude YouTube and forum comments. Igarashi says he'll prove them all wrong, and then this direct comparison, which initially calls the original look poop. When it comes to dismissiveness of a previous art direction, that's the all-timer. Great example, I wish I thought of it. In the episode titled I Bet Ananta Will Be Popular, I'd randomly dropped the honk onto the timeline and then forgot where I put it, and they never brought it up. For the record, it should have gone here, because I know for sure there's some deep pockets out there who will do anything for a complete collection of 5-star skinny anime women. Come on in. And then just last week, I kind of insinuated that only Naughty Dog could afford a Porsche appearance. But then comments pointed out that Cyberpunk, Rocket League, and even Overwatch somehow have already collaborated with Porsche. So while that does indicate that you don't need an HBO show to book the meeting with Porsche, does also reinforce the point that you do have to be a big boy. Nobody's going to be driving a Porsche in fair games. And then finally, there was this. Tip 1, Naruto crossover. Considering my general overall sloppiness, it's kind of surprising there aren't more typos in this program, but some typos are unforgivable. YouTube tells me that 96.2% of this audience is comprised of what they call basic anime fans. Misspelling Naruto's name to that audience would simply be disrespectful. And look at that. Naturo. Not only does Naturo sound like a made-up Beetleborg villain's name, a commenter pointed out that it is in fact a very real cat and dog food company. And so I'm sorry for that. I'm glad we could set this straight. That's really all that's been bugging me. Now we can enter 2025 with absolutely zero baggage. Feels good. Happy New Year to everyone. Everyone except Sasuke.